This is TradeFlow News, bringing you relevant news and insights from around the world. TradeFlow News, enabling trade for SMEs and economies worldwide.
These are some of the key topics that we will be looking into in today's program.
First, let's take a look at the overnight headlines which are impacting the commodity markets.
Oil prices rose more than $2 in Asian trading on Monday after the US and China said they would ease some of their tariff measures, lifting market sentiment that the world's two largest crude users may be moving toward resolving their trade dispute. Brent crude futures climbed $2.11, or 3.3%, to $64.14 a barrel by 0714 GMT. U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude futures were trading at $63.14 a barrel, up $2.12, or 3.47%, from Friday's close. Both sides said on Monday they would suspend 24% of additional ad valorem tariffs on goods from the other country for an initial period of 90 days, in a joint statement following trade talks in Geneva over the weekend.
The United States and China have agreed a deal to temporarily slash reciprocal tariffs as the world's two biggest economies seek to end a damaging trade war that has stoked fears of recession and set financial markets on edge. Speaking after talks with Chinese officials in Geneva, U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said the two sides had agreed on a 90-day pause on measures and that tariffs would come down by over 100 percentage points to a 10% baseline rate. Both countries represented the national interest very well, Bessent said on Monday. We both have an interest in balanced trade. The US will continue moving towards that.
Moving on to the top news in the energy sector.
Vietnam and Russia have agreed to quickly negotiate and sign agreements on building nuclear power plants in Vietnam, the two countries said in a joint statement. The development of the plants with advanced technology will strictly be compliant with nuclear and radiation safety regulations and for the benefit of socio-economic development, they said in the statement, which was dated Sunday and followed a visit to Moscow by Vietnamese leader To Lam. The Southeast Asian nation has restarted plans to develop nuclear power plants that were suspended nearly a decade ago, as part of its efforts to ramp up its power generation capacity to support its fast-growing economy.
China's imports of crude oil edged into positive territory for the first months of the year, but rather than a sign of improving fuel demand, the recovery is more about rising inventories. The world's biggest crude importer recorded arrivals of 11.69 million barrels per day, BPD, in April, down slightly from March's 12.1 million barrels of oil per day but 7.5% higher than the 10.88 million barrels of oil per day from the same month last year, according to customs data released on Friday. March imports were the strongest since August 2023 and the relatively robust outcome for April took arrivals for the first 4 months of the year to 11.83 million barrels of oil per day, up 0.5% from the same period in 2024. Next, we have the top news in metal markets. Industrial metals prices rose on Monday as growth and demand fears eased after China and the United States agreed a deal to reduce reciprocal import tariffs and seek an end to their trade war, though traders said the market remained cautious. Benchmark copper on the London Metal Exchange rose 0.8% to $9,518 a metric ton by 0922 GMT, while aluminium gained 2.1% to $2,464. Speaking after talks with Chinese officials, U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said that two sides had agreed a 90-day pause on measures and that tariffs would come down by more than 100 percentage points to a 10% baseline rate.
Gold dropped 3% to a more than 1-week low on Monday after the US and China said they have agreed to a deal to slash reciprocal tariffs, sending the dollar higher and denting the safe haven metals appeal. Spot gold was down 3% at $3,224.34 an ounce, as of 0812 GMT, its lowest since May 1. US gold futures slipped 3.5% to $3,228.10. The de-escalation of tensions between China and the US, with tariffs being reduced for 90 days, is reducing the demand for safe haven assets like gold, said UBS analyst Giovanni Stornovo.
We will now look at the top news in the agricultural sector.
Chicago soybean futures rose for a third session on Monday, supported by positive developments in US-China trade negotiations over the weekend in Switzerland. Talks concluded on Sunday with US officials touting a deal to reduce the US trade deficit, while Chinese officials spoke of reaching an important consensus and the launch of a new economic dialogue forum. The most active CBOT soybean contract edged up 0.24% to $10.54 a bushel as of 0212 GMT.
That is all for today's news on commodity markets. Stay tuned to TradeFlow News as we continue to provide you with more updates. We also invite you to follow us on Twitter at TradeFlow News, which allows you to watch our program on your mobile device or desktop to receive information from there.